I got asked a really good question the other day, and I don't remember if I actually made a video on this or not. Um, and if I did, well, here's another one. Uh, so it was knowing what I know now, what would I do differently going into real estate? So there's a few things, right? Number one is think way bigger. And at first, I just wanted like a few rentals, right? But I guess that kind of goes with like growing and learning more as your goals expand, right? Like at first, I just wanted like 10 rentals, and now I want like all apartments. The other thing that I think is huge for everyone is like just remove the barrier that everyone has of money, right? Like I always put that barrier in front of me, like, oh, I only have like 10 or 20 grand, I can only buy this house for a rental, with leverage and everything or whatever, right? I always put that barrier in front of me. And once I remove that barrier, literally, if you find the right deal, if you actually have a deal, you'll be able to come up with money, right? From family, from friends, and a perfect example is last year, this apartment building came up and they were only taking cash offers. We put in an offer at 1.4 million cash. I don't have that. The guy put the offer in didn't have that. I don't even know anyone that had that. Right? And then 2 or 3 days later, I had a meeting and we were able to fund that in cash. We obviously didn't get the deal, but that's kind of like what happens when you just remove that barrier. Obviously, it was a good deal, right? That's why the person was going to be able to fund that deal. But that's kind of like what I'm trying to get at is like remove that barrier of, oh, I can only afford this or that or this or that, right? Just find the right deal and then the money will come, right? But at the same time, you do need some money to be doing real estate, right? So that's another thing to keep in mind. The other thing is really don't force a deal, right? Just because you got a deal, even if it's like off market and you think it's a deal, even if it's like 10 or 20 grand off of what everything else is selling for, it still might not be a deal, right? So don't ever force a deal. When you force deals, that's when you lose money. That's when you don't actually invest. That's when you speculate, right? So that's the other thing is don't ever force a deal. If the numbers don't work, even if you spent a lot of time trying to make them work or trying to talk to the lead or whatever it is, just let it go, right? Just, it's fine. Another one will come up, it's the name of the game, right? It's a numbers game. You got to look at X amount of deals and get 1 or 2 deals, right? And then the other thing, it's really hard when I'm doing these in my garage because I have my points. But anyway, so the other thing I want to talk about is really like patting myself on the back for sticking to my criteria, right? Because if I would have bought or overpaid on some of the deals that I looked at like the previous years, in times like this that are crazy, uncertain, whatever, not that it's always ever good to overpay or not stick by your criteria at all, right? But if I would have ended up making those deals, I would have probably been sweating right now a little bit, right? So that's a big important thing that I would say is one of the biggest, right? Like stick to your criteria, stick to what you know. If you want to know more, get around people that know what you want to get into more, so that way you're not making a big mistake, right? Because I was going to say like apartments, but even a house is a big deal, right? If you buy a house wrong and the numbers don't make sense on it, it doesn't make sense, right? So I'm always super conservative and super safe on the numbers just because you never know what happens, right? And why not be super safe and super conservative? Because there's plenty of deals out there, right? You might not get 1 or 2 or 3 or 10 of them, but eventually you will get one. And it's a numbers game, right? So that's the kind of like the biggest things is stop limiting yourself to the amount of money that you think you can afford, right? Always just look for a good deal, because a good deal, the money will follow a good deal. Think way bigger. Obviously, this depends on what your goals are, right? But it was asked what I would do differently with what I know now. Think way bigger, buy way more than what I bought, a few years ago, and that goes for today too, right? It's the whole thing with planting a tree. When's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. When's the best time? Now, right? So, hope that made sense, and let me know if you have any questions. This button, we're gonna figure this out one day.